Wait,
Wait, I have to show you guys this because this popped up today. Have you guys ever seen this meme? I'll test out my share screen. Have you ever seen this meme?
wait. Astrology.
I feel like
Me.
this is. We'll just replace it. That's what I'm doing to the show this week.
We're in for it today, man.
Okay. I have a margarita too.
Oh, that's perfect.
Oh, good. Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca, with co-host, teacher and socialist in the Libra, and writing teacher Jessica. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find that link to our blog in the episode notes. You can find also our personal social media handles as @Don Eduardo Barca and Kenny's @ZepDKE and Jessica's Twitter handle @JHomey89. And we'll have those in the description box below. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. Right, so we will do this very special episode, a break from what we normally do, which is very intense discussions on politics, on weekly current events, and sometimes inviting guests that delve us into very long and very pessimistic rabbit holes, like Alison.
Yeah, and Kenny was supposed to be here today, but he is just being overworked and needed a break this week. So it's just going to be the three of us.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. And we will give a shout out to Kenny just to make sure he feels that he's still in our minds and present with us. One other thing I was going to mention, so I obviously, before we get into our main topic, which is astrology, I'm here finally in San Francisco, right, for a short period of time, and I'll be back in Mexico for another time, and I'm not going to take up too much time to discuss that, but I did mention in the last episode that I had a few folks that I will be sharing their stories with, and also anyone who is interested in donating to their journey up north, because there are Venezuelans who are going up and crossing and immigrating up north. They'll be crossing very many borders. I will link description in the episode notes. I will just put a quick link and to my channel that I didn't want to start, but I'm starting, and I have to post things today. So I will put that all in the episode notes for people to look at if anyone is interested in that. Okay, here we are. Jess, we're having a conversation with you about astrology, which I'm very glad we're having, because it's like a break from everything, and it gives me a chance to sit back and just be curious what you have to say about us and our birth charts.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't remember when this first came up in a conversation. I think it was over the phone, or maybe it was after an episode, where I don't know how it came up, but I was really surprised to know that not just that you were into astrology, but you practiced astrology, that you could give presentations and teach about astrology. Like, you were deep in it, and it was real. I don't know why it was so surprising. I think it has to do with my presumption of you being, again, I hope you're not offended, but like, when I see your logical, like, I think of you as like logical, science mind, that kind of thing. Not the shitty science that is being done in the West, but, real science, real analytical kind of thing. That's how I see. So I was like, and I wasn't like, oh, what are you, crazy or something like that? But I was surprised. And then since I trust you so much, and frankly, I have kind of a negative feeling about astrology. It has more to do with stuff in my past relationship than anything. But since I trust you, I was like, there must be something more there, like everything else now. There's always something more than what you were told when you were young, kind of thing, or even older. So now I'm excited to hear you tell me about astrology, not the bullshit of horoscopes and newspapers, but the real deal.
Yay, I'm excited. you want me to just say a little bit about like how I came to it?
Yeah.
Or-
It would be really great if you could just start off with.
And to tell us, I mean, I think what astrology is, because I just think of it as like a Gemini, these Capricorns with dates, and I don't know where this, and I know it has to do with stars somewhere, but what the heck's going on there?
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many like definitions of astrology, and I don't have a good like cookie cutter elevator speech. I should probably come up with one, but I mean, I guess at base to me astrology is just having a relationship to the planets and the sky, or let's just say the sky. I mean, there's so many different traditions and approaches and practices and lots of history. And I mean, just in terms of my own background, like, I mean, you're making me sound like an expert or something, Andy. Like, I don't think anyone could ever like really even claim that because there's just so much. But yeah, I mean, I don't, there wasn't like a moment for me where I was like, oh my God, I just discovered astrology. Like I kind of knew about star signs and stuff growing up and horoscopes. And I knew I was a Leo and I kind of heard the traits that were associated with that and kind of to some extent identified with that, or at least parts of it. But then I guess in the last about 5 or so years, I started really kind of studying it more seriously. And so reading books and just learning more about it. And then just fell in love with it. And it became kind of like a hobby. It became something where I love birth charts. That's one aspect of it that I just absolutely love looking at people's birth charts and just kind of, approaching it with that like text, English majory, English teacher me, and just kind of analyzing it and seeing how people make meaning out of it. And so then like friends started to ask me like, oh, can you do a birth chart reading for me? And it just kind of became a part of my life that was growing like less and less casual, I guess. And then this year was the first year, like this summer, I'm holding my first like official astrology workshops at the local art center here in La Grande, which is pretty cool that they're letting me do that. And it's really cool to do it like in the context of an art studio. It's like an art museum, but they hold classes and stuff. And then I do some birth chart readings here and there. So as like a professional astrologer, I feel like I am just like putting on my like kindergartner like baby shoes. But yeah, I don't know. And I guess I should also just say when I'm talking about astrology and like when we look at the birth charts today, so I mainly study Western astrology. There's different practices, which can sort of vaguely be grouped into like Eastern and Western, or some people say like Vedic and Western. So there are lots of different approaches in terms of like what the zodiac even is, what planets count as planets, just how you're tracking everything, the house system, blah, 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 like all this stuff. There's so many different approaches. I feel like also part of why I love astrology and why I actually don't, yes, there's sort of like the whatever left, right side of the brain, right? And it's funny that you view me as analytical and like sciencey, Andy, because I feel like most of my life people have seen me as very right brained. Yeah, like very creative. I like write poetry and but I feel like astrology is super cool because it is both science and math and physics. Like it's very there's a lot of like calculation and there's a lot of like material reality that goes into it. I mean, it's literally tracking like angles, degrees. I mean, astronomy, obviously it's bound up in that. And traditionally, like if you go back and kind of look at the history of astrology, it was considered part of the sciences. It was, alongside like philosophy, which now, is kind of seen more of like the humanities on the other side. But there's a lot of math, there's a lot of physics, there's a lot of that, kind of like left brain stuff that goes into it. But then it's also, especially the way that I approach it, it's also an art, I think. Like reading a birth chart is very much an artistic practice. I think it's a creative practice. It's to me, like, it's about storytelling. It's about like how, I mean, in some ways, everything, like every way that humans make meaning is sort of bound up in this idea of like creating stories, interpreting stories, right? Like, what are the stories that you tell yourself about your day, about your life, about your relationships? What are the stories that you tell yourself about yourself or other people tell about yourself? Or what are the stories that like you kind of bury, maybe because they're too dark or confusing or triggering or traumatic? So for me, I actually think like I teach English. I'm a writer. I kind of live in a world of stories, and so I see it as like part of that practice, and it's just sort of another way in. Obviously, there's also a sort of spirituality element to it, but yeah, I don't know. That's like a little bit of kind of how I think about it.
I know we're going to do birth charts, but can I ask a few questions that came up in my mind? You're talking. Number one, I'm going to call myself a horse or a what's that called? Astrology normie who only knows astronomy like from the newspaper or looking online, and you look to see what your horoscope was on the day.
Yeah, first like what's going to happen this month?
Right, or yes, right, and also day to day. In the newspaper, you see each day you could get your horoscope that day, and blah blah blah. So number one, what is from what you've learned? What is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that a normie like me has about astrology? And then number two, what was the most surprising thing you found in your own investigation of astrology? Like, because you went you were a believer or feeling like there was something really meaningful here, and then you did a deep dive. I'm wondering what kind of things surprised you and were the most meaningful that you uncovered in your study.
Okay. Okay, let me take the first question first. I think probably the biggest normie misconception, and there's definitely astrologers that would disagree with this, but I don't know any, and I definitely don't approach this way. But I think from my perspective, the biggest misconception is that astrology and even horoscopes are not compatible with the idea of free will and agency and people changing and the uncertainty of the future. I mean, part of that is where I'm at with my skill set, at least right now. I don't really like, there's some people who are like what we might call like predictive astrologers. Like that's something that they do. They write horoscopes. Sometimes I listen to horoscopes. I think they're interesting. And there's a science and an art to that as well. And I don't think it's all bullshit. For me, like, I don't think that's my strength, at least not right now. For me, my strength is more in line of like character analysis, thinking about human psychology, human relationships, and how a birth chart or just studying astrology in general can kind of be, it can be a tool for actually opening up more freedom in your life and more like becoming more conscious of the choices that you have, like both material and immaterial. So yeah, I think like that there's a conception from some people like, oh, astrology is just like purely like, you're gonna die young, or you should buy a lottery ticket at this time on this day, and that it's all like everything is destined. You're just going through the motions of living out your life, and you have no control. I actually, in my practice, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like it actually expands my understanding of free will and my connection to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I was just going to say that's what I was told, or I don't know where exactly I learned it from, but people go to astrologers to find that predictive part of their life, to figure out what to do to prevent something, some ill will thing or something, or how to better their life, or how to conquer certain thing. And that's how I have originally imagined it. But then you're saying what I've also recently started to hear, which is there's like a more character analysis to who you are as a person, to deepen and to find your strengths and weaknesses in your birth chart or whatever they read in you, right? I think that that's more recent for me, but always has been most predictive in my understanding of astrology.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about your second question too, Andy. What's surprised me? I feel like so many things. I mean, this is sort of, I guess, more like a stock answer, but it is true. Like, I feel like the more I learn, this probably applies to everything, but it's so intense with astrology. Like, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And it's just amazing, like how many hours you can spend studying, and just the realization of how much you have no idea about. And I feel like I could study this stuff for my entire life and I would just know like this much. It's so humbling, but in the best way.
Yeah, I want you to continue to answer that, but to me, what that says is it's a serious discipline. Like that's how it is when you take on something that is almost feels like infinite. That you can only you're just making a little bit of headway in the time of your own life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else any particular thing that you learned across the way that kind of really surprised you?
There's a lot of stuff. I'm having trouble narrowing it down, but maybe one thing, from more of like the, I guess like teacher perspective, now that I'm kind of starting to inhabit that role, is just what an effect something like a birth chart reading or a workshop can have on people. Like that, seeing that as like an offering. And I mean, who knows? Like, you never know what, maybe people walk away and they're just like, God, that was awful. That was a waste of money. But I don't know. I mean, you see people kind of come alive, and sometimes it starts out, and this was true for me. Like, it starts, like, usually most people, the first birth chart they encounter is their own, right? And so some of it comes from like oh, like tell me about me, right? Like, it's kind of a narcissistic entry point for a lot of people, like myself included. But I do think like a really good birth chart reading, and I've had the experience of both like giving one and receiving lots of really amazing readings. You just walk away like feeling so empowered, like not in, I hate that word. Why have liberals ruined that word? But you walk away like feeling so hopeful and so, just like in charge of your life, but also kind of trusting in the universe and your own ability to just kind of navigate. And that's awesome. But I think also with that comes, like, with that offering comes so much responsibility. And it is like, especially in mainstream culture, because astrology's become, especially in recent years, like, it's part of the pop culture. It's like a whole sort of, there's a whole world of like Instagram memes and everything, right? And it's fun and it's gimmicky, and it brings people together. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But there's also something like really intimate about somebody giving me, and I mean, you guys have done this, like, it's like, what a privilege for somebody to give you their birth data or to share their birth chart with you, with the expectation that, like, I'm trusting you to like interpret this, not like for me. Of course, like anything I say, like, I'm just another person. Like, I don't know. I don't know anything. Like, I just said, I know this much. So I'm very careful with what I try to be really careful with what I say. And, I would never, I don't even really do like the predictive thing, like I said, but I know, if somebody were to say in a birth chart reading, like, oh, like, your children are going to die, or like, you're, all sorts of things, right? I mean, that's an extreme example, but people are really listening. Like, they're really listening in this type of a context. And so I think it's a huge, like, just honor and responsibility to get to inhabit that role. So yeah, I guess that's something that's, I don't know if it surprised me, but it's like, it's a very interesting and intense experience.
Did you have something I can ask?
You should ask, Edward. That's one of the questions I would ask before we do our birth chart, which is now making me nervous.
I wanted to know if you thought that astrology is, well, how astrology is compatible, or you think it's like with other sort of alternative therapies, like, or alternative ways of healing, or alternative holistic approaches to the whole body and mind and spirit. Like, you know, there's yoga, there's also tarot readings. This is all in the realm of getting to know oneself, which I think is the ultimate goal of ourselves, right? To know oneself, to be able to become a better human. And so how is it a complement to other things, other therapies, other ways of these alternative philosophies?
Totally. Can you guys hear the rager music coming from my neighbor? He just pulled up. I don't know how he can drive and not go deaf. Hopefully it'll stop in a second. I think it's totally compatible. And I even know like there's astrologers who will practice like both Eastern and Western astrology. So I mean that's not like it's not like yoga or something like totally, totally different healing practice like you said, Eduardo. But even that, like, I think a lot of it is framed as like, oh, it's like Eastern versus Western, like these are different. And yeah, there's fundamental differences, but it doesn't mean that they're not compatible. And there's people who like literally integrate them and apply them in such interesting ways. And yeah, I mean, I totally like, yeah, it's funny you said yoga, because that's something I'm doing a lot of right now. I'm about to go on this teacher training intensive program. And I'm constantly thinking like about the relationship between those two and how they could almost like support each other, or like I feel like I bring my astrology knowledge and practice to my yoga mat and vice versa. Same thing with like any practice of reflection or therapy or healing. I mean, it's all about how you choose to apply it. I mean, you could look at astrology as like purely a spiritual practice or purely a science or whatever. So it's not that it necessarily like has to flow with other stuff, but I do think that that's one of the cool things about it is like, I'm hard pushed to think of something that it's just like not compatible with. I don't know, I guess institutional religion maybe, but even that, not really. Like it's just about energy and self-reflection and thinking about your orientation to other people and to the world. So I feel like you can apply it to anything. I'm reading a book right now actually about it's about astrology, but it's specifically about Jupiter and Saturn in the context of teaching adolescents and like how like young kids learn. And it's like super cool because I don't teach that age, but it's just, I would never think of that. Like, oh, like let's look at like the Jupiter and Saturn transits, because Jupiter is kind of like expansion energy, and then Saturn's kind of like restriction, right? And you think about kids in a classroom, and especially really young kids, right? It's like all of this, like, oh my God, the world, like hopefully, right, if they're being supported. But then, as you age, there's obviously things in your life or points in your life, and especially in a classroom context, right, where it's like you have to set boundaries, you have to set limitations, and sometimes that's really hard, sometimes it's helpful. So it's just one example of like applying it to just a very like kind of everyday thing.
Just then, would you then say, just to give sort of like a brief summary of astrology, like it has to do, as you said, with celestial planets, bodies, stars, everything, and its influence on humans, on nature, and I don't know, fill in what else it might.
Yeah, and nature's influence on us for sure. I mean, I always one of the like the best examples. I mean, first of all, like if people think it's just like poppycock and it's not helpful for them and they're not interested in it, that's fine. Like I always think it's funny when astrologers are like really triggered by that, because it's like if it's there for you, like if it's helpful, if it's generative, amazing. If it's not, like, whatever, it's not for you, right? But I do think like the tides, right, is a great example of sort of our material relationship to the moon, right? I mean, I know there's just some assumptions. We got a lot of conspiracy theorists in our space here who maybe have different opinions on the moon and Earth and that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, you can't deny that the tide, right, or even just the cycle of like day to night, right, the sun rising and the sun going down, that doesn't influence our lives, right? That doesn't affect us on even just like a physical level, right? I mean, another good one, right, is also with the moon, right, is women's menstrual cycles. Like, what's going on with that? Like, you can't say we're not connected to the planets, right? And these energies, like that we don't have a relationship there, both in terms of outward influence and then being influenced, right? That so many women, like if they're on their natural cycles, that they sync up with the moon, right? Like that's crazy. Well, it's not crazy, right? But it's sort of a testament to this idea that like we're not separate from nature. So you don't have to believe in astrology specifically, but yes, it is absolutely about like our relationship to the stars, our relationship to the sky.
Can I just say a few things that have come to my mind, even in the time you talk? Because I don't know if I'm just delaying so you don't get to the birth chart, but it also is
anything, Andy. It's pre-recorded.
I know. No, it's not. It's not about recording. It's something else. I can probably tell you. I mean, but so far already, my mind. I feel like what came to my mind as you were talking is because you did talk about where like you talked about some of the fields that kind of come into play with astrology, and it felt like it was some sort of intersection of astronomy and psychology, kind of the big expansive universe kind of coming in on a single person, but also connection between those two. That's the vision I had of science fields being melded here to make astrology. And the other thing that came to mind as I was in terms of even people's skepticism of something like a birth chart reading, and I thought of people doing 23andMe, or that whole thing where people are collecting their genetic data to find out that's all that is them saying, we're going to use your DNA to place you somewhere to tell you something about yourself in terms of your genes and things like that. Where do you fit on the spectrum of the human species? I personally think there's not a lot that comes of that, but that's what that is. And it's so interesting that the world of the fourth industrial revolution is a 23andMe world, trying to do that, like trying to like take everything and lock it into this. We're going to measure it. We're going to tell you the number, and that number is going to tell you the thing. Whereas sounds like the process you're describing is really like, it's a saying like, what is my place in the universe, and because it's me and it is the universe, and I'm part of it and I'm in it, but the universe is out there and it influences me. This thing seems to have a very different relationship to the question of where am I, who am I, and what am I. It does invite a lot more, if you will. You could say it's speculation or creativity, but it offers a lot more space for motion within it, versus for all the talk of like, oh, here's your future. I just think of this 23andMe stuff, and they're like, well, that's your future, like that's what they're trying to get to. So it just made me think about those things.
I have already harvested both your data, so too late. We'll be selling it to third parties for profit. No, totally. Yeah, it's so flexible. Like I can say, okay, you were born in 29 degrees of Cancer, but like what you do with that information, that's kind of up to you. Or if you're giving it to 23andMe, it becomes up to them. So there's that kind of brings up like the dark side of it. Like there's a potential there, to negatively impact people for sure. Like and that's why like I brought up like the whole trust thing of like, it is a very big deal to share this type of thing with somebody or some corporate entity. Like there's a lot of apps, right? Just like with everything, astrology is no exception. Like there's all these apps now where you can plug in your information and it will tell you. And I'm sure like a lot of those interpretations are great and really helpful and true for people. But there's also a dark side to that kind of like corporate capture of it. even if to some of us, like, it just seems like zeros and ones, right? Like, oh, it doesn't matter. No, it's a value to people who who know what to do with it.
I was going to, well, ask you, by the way, because I was going to ask you about each one of us, so I can ask another question follow up about our astrological signs. And your birthday was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Happy birthday, Jess.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday from what's left and from the audience to Jess. I hope you had a good birthday yesterday.
I did.
Oh, good. So you are, because I guess what I wanted to ask is, so if you're a Leo and then I'm, what am I?
You're a Cancer, but you're like so close to the cusp.
Okay, and then there's Andy, who is, because I guess what is Andy before I?
Cancer.
Cancers, well, that's right. Okay.
You're both Cancers.
So if we are, we have our horoscope, then does each, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you can answer this question, which is, if we have a certain horoscope, does that mean that we fall in perfectly into the kind of characteristics that because I think that's what the understanding is, that we kind of share the same characteristics, right? I'm supposed to share the same characteristics with Andy, and you're supposed to share the characteristics with my friend Amanda, who is also a Leo. And is that how it works? So if I look at someone and I just ask them, this is what usually happens. And this is why I'd like to know more details about this birth chart, because I feel people categorize people so easily into these boxes, and we're supposed to be these horoscopes and these traits immediately. And it almost seems reductive, but the birth chart is more detailed. It gives us more details of what we don't know about ourselves and how different we are, even within, like Andy and I are different from each other.
Yeah.
I don't see that way of thinking when most people talk about astrology. They sort of just box people in. What's your response to that?
Yeah, and I think this will be better illustrated by looking at the birth charts, but I'll just say two things about that, which relates back to like Andy's earlier question about horoscopes. Yeah, like if you're looking at, some, Cosmo magazines, like 3-sentence horoscope, like that's what they're going off of, right? They're going off of, oh, you're a Leo? Okay, here you go, Leo, here's your horoscope, right? And so if you're just looking at, okay, there's 12 zodiac signs, Cancer, Leo, and 10 others, your personality should be the same as Andy's, right? You're the same person, right? With that extremely reductive, like overly simplistic framework. And so that also kind of brings up the East-West thing. So we're almost talking in code without realizing that we are, right? Like when people ask in Western culture, like, oh, what's your sign? What they're asking is, what's your sun sign? So they're asking what zodiac sign was the sun in when you were born. So yeah, there's 12 categories, right? But there's other planets, right? There's other factors, there's houses, there's all these other things that go into it. And even for people who don't have any knowledge of like those systems, right? Like if you just think about it, I mean, nobody else was born in the exact instant, in the exact place, right? Like in time and in space where you were. Even twins, right? Like they're born at different times, technically, right? One comes and then the other one comes. It might be very close together. So when you're looking at something like a birth chart or just studying astrology in general, like you can go, I mean, if you have the information, you can go as precise as you want to and as you have the skills to do, right? So we can look at it like on such a granular level, like literally to the exact coordinates, right? So like there's other people that have your birthday, I'm sure, Eduardo, apparently Kylie Jenner has my birthday, right? But we were born in different places. So there's so much that goes into it, right? And that's why, like, when I am pulling your birth chart, I have to know not only your birthday, but I have to know exactly where you were born and what time. And we'll look at, because with Andy, like, we don't actually have an exact birth time. I can show you, like, just the matter of like an hour or two, his chart will look different. I mean, there's still a lot that we can ascertain that would stay the same, but it changes, right? Like even from just 1 a.m. versus 2 a.m. Oh, and then the Eastern Western thing, I just bring that up because one of the sort of basic differences between Eastern or Vedic astrological modes of study versus Western is that Western is mostly focused around the sun, right? And the Earth's relationship to the sun. That's why, like, we default to like, what's your sign? We mean your sun sign. We're not asking like, oh, where was Pluto or where was the moon? It's all very kind of egocentric, like to Earth and the sun, whereas Eastern traditions tend to be much more lunar based. So when you look at like your Chinese zodiac sign, it's more based on the moon. It doesn't mean that there's not other factors, but that's a very basic kind of distinction. And just in terms of sort of the interpretation of those two, call them like luminaries, right? Because the moon lights up the night sky and the sun lights up the daytime sky. Like just on a very basic level, the sun typically tends to represent kind of like your self, your ego, your self-expression. And then the moon is more your emotional life. So it's interesting to kind of think about that distinction, just in light of like Western culture and kind of cultural differences and how you base a society around certain values, right? And I'm not saying that like, oh, Eastern cultures are like, all they care about is emotions and all we care about is our ego. Not at all. But I do think there's some fundamental differences there. Eastern astrology also just goes way, way, way further back. Western astrology is basically ancient Greece. I mean, they drew a lot on the Egyptians, but it's really, we're talking like 4500 BC, which was a long time ago, but Eastern traditions go back way, way, way further.
And you would say that all cultures sort of have had some form of astrology, whether the Mayans and the Europeans and the Africans and the Asians.
I think so. And if you look at ancient texts, like of any kind, any culture, with an eye for astrology, you'll find it. I mean, everything, like, right, the Bible, I mean, right, they're following the brightest star in the sky, right? Like literally the wise men were astrologers. And almost every religious text, like you can find elements of studying the sky. The Greeks were really, so like the Egyptians kind of looked at the sky and they started, making up sort of myths in terms of like a sky god, and then it kind of split and became, or it was actually a goddess, it was actually female. And then it kind of split into two, day goddess and night goddess. And then it was the Greeks that kind of took the Egyptians' work and they started thinking about the sky as sort of like this, what's the word I'm looking for? And there's many gods,
polytheism,
polytheistic vision of the sky. And they started creating these myths around like different planets and different rulers and all of it. So yeah, it was a little bit of an overly simplistic explanation, but a little bit.
So I guess we should get into the birth charts.
Okay, let's do it. So just remember that everything I say, like I'm just a person. It's your, like, take it or not. And yeah. And I'm, like I said, I'm not gonna like, I would never say like, oh, like this is gonna happen to you or whatever. That's just not really my style. But yeah, I've got him. Let's pull him up. It was really cool actually to look. I don't think I've ever looked at because I looked at yours and also Kenny's kind of like back to back today. And I've looked at people's parts in relationship to each other, like in a romantic relationship context, family, like parent-child or siblings, friendships and stuff. But it was just like kind of interesting, like with our little what's left family. And yeah, there were totally like patterns, and you all have like these really strong Cancer placements, which I thought was so interesting. Anyway, okay, who wants to go first?
Andy. We should go with Andy.
All right, well, let's do it.
I want to know about.
Am I supposed to do anything, or am I just a listener?
No. Well, I mean, I don't want to just talk at you guys, but I'll say some stuff and then just jump in. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen.
I want to know all of Andy's secrets.
Shut the fuck up.
How can we control him?
Honestly, I'm more. Actually, it's more worrisome, Jessica. It's not about you saying like, oh, you're gonna only live to your 73. It is more the fact that I know you, but I don't know you that well. I am. It's almost like, ooh, I'm feeling a little exposed, and it's because I know you now, and that's a little like scary or something like that. So I don't know.
It's actually my favorite like context to do birth chart readings, which I don't get to do very often. This particular like context is where I kind of know the person, but I don't. It's not like somebody that I like grew up with or I've known for like decades or I spend every day with, and I feel like I know you guys, but I know you through the internet and in this one very specific context or workers and students for choice, right? So like I know you like a little bit, but I feel like I don't have like I don't know your your deepest traumas or secrets or whatever. So it's actually kind of a cool It's from
just saying. Go ahead.
And one thing I'll say, so this is Andy's chart.
What the hell is
that? It's more or less Andy's chart. I'll say something about the birth time in a minute. What I really wish I could remember what astrologer or who said this to me, but it really stuck with me. They said your birth chart includes the entire sky. So what we're looking at when we're looking at a chart is a snapshot of the sky, in this case, at the instant Andy was born. Okay, so if you think of the horizon line as this, east-west axis right here, right? Like if you were looking out, well, in some cases with a very, very powerful telescope, but if you were looking out at the instant of Andy's birth from the place he was born, this would be everything above the horizon. All of this you wouldn't be able to see from your positioning. And so I just love that idea that like, okay, yes, we have all these planets and asteroids and things, and they're in certain positions, and that's a lot of what analyzing a birth chart is about. But the whole sky is included. Like even these places where there's no planets, this energy is still available to you, to everyone, right? Like all the houses, all the zodiac signs, all the planets, it's all there. It's all contained. So there's no like, oh, like you're boxed in here because your Mars is in this sign in this house. Like it's all available, right? If you're mad, there's a way out. If you're sad, like there's a polar opposite energy, right? Which I find very freeing. Now, okay, so Andy gave me, and just check I got this right, Brooklyn State Hospital, right? New York-ish.
It was a hospital in Brooklyn. I don't think I know the name, unfortunately. And
as long as we've got this is, again, we could go like into the degrees of the degrees of the degrees. We're not going to do that level today, but as long as you have like the correct city, we're good.
And the time is, I know I was born early in the morning. If someone was forcing me to guess, I actually think it was like 12:45 a.m., something like that. But I remember it was somewhere between 3 and 12. That's the thing I would know.
12 midnight to 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so if I were doing like a proper full-blown birth chart reading, we would probably try to do something called a birth chart rectification. And there's so many different approaches to doing this, but it's basically like when you don't have an exact birth time, or some astrologers will actually do it for everyone. because they don't want to just trust whatever the hospital wrote down or whatever the person's mom remembers or whatever. I think there's a lot of risk with that. I have my own opinions about rectification, but if like, and this would be actually, it would be very helpful to know a window like that. Like it cuts down on the amount of work that an astrologer would have to do a rectification, knowing like, okay, we don't know your exact birth time, but we do have like a 3-hour window. So if we were doing a real birth chart reading, or a more like a more full one, what I would do probably is have Andy give me some important dates from his life, like really concrete, like big moves, like, oh, there's this big move, or I got married, or whatever. And I would pull a few different charts, like maybe a 12, a 1, a 2, and a 3, and we would look at the various sort of major transits, meaning like movements of the planets, and see if it kind of match things up. This is one approach to a rectification, but I'll just show you. So right now this is 3 a.m. This is set at 3 a.m. So if I'm on hours. So if I go back, this is 2 a.m. And if you kind of, especially in this bottom quadrant here, if you kind of watch, since there's a lot of planets down there, now we're at 1 a.m. Now we're at 12. So
pretty different.
Visually it's very different. Just they obviously moved, right? A lot of it stays the same, okay? Because for the majority of the planets, they're not going to change from one zodiac sign to the next within the hour. Like some of them take literally years to move, in a full rotation. And it's, you can think of it, the sun, right, is about 365-day revolution, right? And then as you think further out and further out, like all the way to Pluto, Pluto takes, I don't know how long to go around, but a long ass time. So there's like what we've referred to as like outer planets, and then the inner, what are sometimes called personal planets. So some of them are faster moving, and it's the faster moving ones that we kind of have to worry about when we have uncertainty with the timing. So the moon, for instance, is going to change zodiac signs about every 2.5 days, give or take. So that one, if this were to be a day where the moon changed signs, which is about 1 out of every 3 days, give or take, we would have to watch that. The other thing that it changes is these numbers on the inside are the house placements. Now the house placements, you really need to know the precise, like within an hour or so, you need to know the precise placement. So you can see, like, if we go at 12 a.m., 1 a.m., what house each planet is in is going to change across the board. So I think for this conversation, we're just not even going to talk about the houses, because we don't know. We don't have time to do a full rectification. The other major thing that changes is what's called the ascendant. So the ascendant is always the first house. It's basically like the constellation that's sort of coming up in the sky as you're born. So you'll hear it referred to as an ascendant or a rising sign. Someone's like I'm a Leo rising. And so that will change. So we have 3 options for Andy. We have Aries, if he was born closer to 12. We have Taurus, if he was born closer to 1. And then Gemini, actually 2 or 3 p.m. So there's, things that we could consider in terms of guessing that, because the ascendant kind of tends to be what you outwardly express. So for some people, it's like their physical appearance. It might be how they look, or tattoos or scars. It might be the undertone of their skin. It can be a very like material thing, or it can also just be kind of like how they hold themselves, like stuff like Geminis talk with their hands a lot. But it's tricky, right? Like it's not, there's no black and white there. So where I think maybe we could start, and we can do this for both of you. So there's something you'll hear referred to as the big 3. And the big 3 is your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. And I think in sort of normie culture, like they're overemphasized, just like the sun sign is overemphasized. Like that's all people talk about, right? If they're not really studying this stuff. So you end up with a very reductive, like Eduardo said, a very reductive interpretation of someone's personality. That said, I think sun sign, moon sign, and ascendant are often placed like a really good place to start, especially if you haven't studied astrology. So I mean, the first thing that I noticed about Andy's chart is that you have a ton of stuff in Cancer over here. So I knew that your sun sign was in Cancer because I knew your birthday. But you have what we would call stellium. So it means that there's 3 or more planets in either one zodiac sign or one house. And in your case, you've actually got 4, and 3 of them are personal planets. So you have your sun is in Cancer, your moon is in Cancer, your Mars is in Cancer, and your Jupiter is in Cancer. That's a lot of Cancer energy. Now
that doesn't sound good, actually. It sounds very dangerous.
No,
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
There's a great quote by Ibn Arabi, I think that's how you say the name, who was like a Sufi mystic astrologer. And he said, the chart is perfect. Like everybody's chart is perfect. Like it has everything you need to live your life however you want to live it, right? All the possibilities, all the growth that needs to happen. So there's certainly like things where people are like, oh God, like he's a Scorpio, must be a serial killer, right? Or like, oh my gosh, I have all these squares, which squares represent tension, right? But I think that's a very reductive way to look at things. So Cancer, and I yeah, let me say something about Cancer, and then maybe I'll kind of pause and let you guys jump in. But Cancer, I want to emphasize because, like I said, there was huge like Cancer placements in all 3, including Kenny's chart. Andy has, I think, the most, but Eduardo also has key Cancer placements, and I believe Kenny's moon is in Cancer, assuming his birth time that he gave me is correct. So Cancer is, it's the sign of home. It's the sign of the mother. So every sign has, in Western astrology, they say masculine, feminine. In Eastern, it's yin yang. Might surprise people because I know I'm always banging on about biological sex, but I actually prefer the yin yang term because I think masculine, feminine, it's just so like heavily gendered in terms of like male, female in our culture. So when I say something's a yin or a feminine energy, which Cancer is a feminine energy, I don't mean it in the sense that like it's girly or like weak or anything. You know, all of us, right? All of us have, just even within a day, let alone our lives, right? Like we have moments where we are more acting more in terms of output, and then more receptive or like sensitive moments, right? Everybody has both of those energies within them, right? And they're both useful and necessary. So Cancer is the sign of the mother. The cliche, right, is like, oh, Cancers are so emotional, they cry all the time. I actually think of Cancer as a really, really strong energy. It's like mama bear energy, right? The sign for Cancer is the crab. And the crab, right, has like a really hard exterior and a really soft interior. So it's kind of like if you think of like the archetype of the mother, and again, like not in the sense that it has to be female, but just thinking of that archetype, right? Like it's soft, it's caring, it's sensitive, but it's also incredibly protective, right? Like out in nature, you don't want to cross any species as mother, right? So yeah, it's the sign of home, like home in all senses, like the physical home environment, but also the broader idea of home. It's a water sign. So there's the different elements, right? There's water, air, fire, and earth in the Western tradition. Water signs tend to be associated with emotions, feelings, they tend to be associated with really keen intuition. What else? Spirituality to some degree, kind of fluidity, creativity, like art. And there's multiple signs, multiple water signs, not just Cancer, obviously. But yeah, it is a lot of Cancer, but it didn't surprise me. But what's kind of crazy about Andy's chart is there's not just Cancer here. You actually have these, what we call trines. So it's interesting to think about, each planet being in this sign. The sun is in Cancer, Mercury is in Leo, Pluto is in Virgo. That can tell you a lot, but where I think the chart really starts to come alive is when you start looking at the relationship of one planet to another, just positionally. So for instance, Andy's sun and his moon are what we call a conjunction. They're conjunct. So they're 1 degree apart. So they're almost on top of each other. Like if we're looking out, they're like, just from an angular perspective, they're almost on top of each other. So that tends to signify like a sort of merging of energies. What Andy's got too is these crazy water trines. So a trine obviously sounds like triangle, right? And that's these blue lines that you're looking at, forming a triangle. So we're just looking at angles. So it's obviously 360 degrees around here. So there's different relationships depending on the angle. And the trine is sort of the most easy, like fluid exchange of all of the different, what we call aspects or angles. And so Andy's got all these Cancer planets here, right? Which is a water sign. Trining Saturn, and this is actually an asteroid, Chiron, in Pisces, which is another water sign. Trining Neptune in the South Node in another water sign, which is Scorpio. So you have all three, and you just have water like flowing all through here. It's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool, I don't think I've ever seen, obviously I've never seen a chart quite like this because everybody's is different. But it's a lot of water, and it's like all different types of water: Pisces, Scorpio, and Cancer, which is pretty cool. You want me to pause and see?
Yeah. Can I tell you some things that were coming up as you were speaking?
Yeah, please.
Well, first off, most of the things that came up as you spoke about the yin yang, male, female, were, I think back to our discussion about transgender when we had a difference of opinion where I was like, no, there's been a freeing for me as a result of these men who are changing sex to women, and women. Like for me, I kept on talking about how I felt boxed in. And I've for much of my life, I was not conscious of it, but my understanding is feeling very boxed in by a gender role, like much of my life, gender role of a man, and my father, wanted me to play baseball, wants me to be tough, don't cry, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. Not just my dad, but male culture growing up in the Midwest. That was one thing. The other thing that made me think about is, honestly, if I was going to say I had a superpower, it might be empathy, like the ability to kind of just kind of from a little piece of information intuit what might go deeper. And I think it's helped me as a teacher. And I think it's helped form the relationships that led to me officiating a wedding of a student, like that. And most of my counseling work, like I've been counseling for 16 years, has really been about opening me up to emotion that have been like, I've always thought of as concrete over that for myself, but it's all been about like jackhammering that stuff to allow emotions to emerge so I could read them. Cause that my complete detachment growing up has only been able to be dealt with by breaking up that layer that was over me that didn't allow me access to emotions. And all the work I've done to do that has only made me more at peace. It's not, I used to be afraid of emotions, and now I'm like, I'm not at all, and the last thing that you said when you talked about and Eduardo, you're going to have to make a decision of whether we include this. I'm fine with including it, but I know you're related to it too, is a big moment in my teaching life when that was significant for my personal development was a moment when Eduardo's not sister, but cousin, was going to be taken from the school, and there was a kind of an assault that she was under, and I was very close to her, and I inserted myself in a way I've never inserted myself as a protector at that moment. She was fine with that, and that moment was a very transformative experience for me. Like when I stepped in and said, I'm going to protect this person from these things that are happening to them, and I'm not related to her, but I care about her so much that I can't imagine not acting at this moment and doing something to help her and to help her get through this thing she's going through. And that I know it was meaningful for her, but it was an extremely meaningful moment for me to go to that place and to get there and to be when you described the mother with the hard shell kind of thing, like it was I think people would think of that as a very motherly response right then, even though I think I had a kind of male energy, what people describe as a male energy, when I was like, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to just let her be kicked out of this or taken out of the school. She's been working. People were trying to help her, but I was just really concerned about how she was just being yanked. And I wanted her to be able to keep connection to the things that were still important to her, including myself. So those are some of the things I think about as you were talking.
Yeah, hearing that anecdote, like I'm especially thinking about your Mars placement here, which doesn't change again. Like, your Mars is in Cancer no matter what time you were born, and so Mars is the planet. I mean, it's ruled by Aries, the god of war, right? So it can often represent kind of like how people fight, like how they battle. And I think like what you just said, right? Like this is like protector energy. And then the other thing I was thinking about, and this really reflects like my experiences with you, even though I haven't known you that long, your moon and your sun, like I mentioned, are conjunct. So they're almost right on top of each other. And so when that happens, we know that is on, or in this case, like really close to, because it's 1 degree apart, really close to a new moon. So you were born close to a new moon, which oftentimes kind of symbolizes like initiating energy. And doing this reading, right, like it would be very different talking to you when you were 25 versus now. It's not to say that like, oh, because you have a Mars in Cancer, like you're automatically going to be a protector of the people that you love, or you're automatically going to be emotional or whatever. But I think that there's this sense that like that role's there for you. Like if you want to inhabit it, you are so capable of that, right?
Mm.
And sometimes it takes years to grow into these things. Maybe sometimes it never happens. Some people look at astrology as like extending beyond one lifetime, like if you believe in past lives or reincarnation, things like that. But one thing, like just in terms of like protector energy, and also like initiation, like you are the initiator, like in our little what's left family, right? Like you're the mom, like you keep everybody together, right? You're like, guys, we need a title, we need a thumbnail. Okay, what time are we meeting? Like we would be a mess, right? Or
on top of it. Oh.
Yeah, and workers for students for choice, right? Like you're like, let's start this, like let's initiate this, right? And I think it's very reflective of like even just the short stuff that you just shared. You also have Mercury, I want to mention down here. So this is not in a water sign, this is in Leo. So Mercury is the planet of communication, ideas, exchange, sometimes technology to an extent. And so your Mercury is in Leo, which that when I saw that, I was like, yep. Like you speak from the heart. Leo is the heart. It's like the backbone. There's body parts that are associated with each sign. There's symbols and colors and everything, right? But body parts is an interesting. There's actually a whole field of astrology, medical astrology, where they study the body. But yeah, it's like Leo's the heart. So communication from the heart. Interesting, like the red shows us that Mercury was in retrograde. So maybe you guys have heard of this because it's become a big thing in like pop culture. Like, oh my God, my phone broke. Mercury's retrograde. It's not like a super uncommon thing. It happens several times a year. But it's this almost like trick of the eye phenomenon where from our perspective for a time, it looks like, and it's not really happening as an optical illusion, but it looks like Mercury is actually moving backwards. So if you think of like driving on the freeway, right? If you're going faster than the car next to you, it looks like the car is same thing in terms of the mechanics of it. So you were born during a Mercury retrograde. So again, like, I don't know, it's probably like 20%. I don't know. I'm so bad at the math and sometimes the physics as well. But astrology has actually helped me a little bit with that stuff. But yeah, so you were born during Mercury retrograde, which can sometimes kind of like Mercury retrograde is often associated with breakdowns in communication, like things not working, appointments being missed, your car breaking down, your phone, dropping your phone, stuff like that. So it often gets kind of a bad rap. And it can be like, okay, there's like an inhibition or a challenge or a block in terms of communication that you have had to learn, Andy. Like, and I mean, I think of you as like a really amazing communicator, like in your teaching and then the podcast and just in general. But worth noting, and Mercury when any planet's retrograde, like it's often more productively than being like, oh, communication's breaking down. Like it's supposed to be a time to kind of be more introspective, reflect, kind of go inward, maybe do creative things. And Leo is like the biggest, like that's the sign of creativity, self-expression. So I think it's kind of interesting that your Mercury is in retrograde. I'd be really curious, like what house it's actually in. But yeah, we won't get into that.
Is there any reason why in this astrology chart you can find reasons why he is so stubborn?
Well, I mean, all of us on this show, I feel like, are so
yes, but yeah.
Oh, but,
when I went,
when
I went to on What's Left, Andy shared his experience in hospital. He was, he had to be there for some time, and I think I shared the experience where I was with him, and I said to him, Andy, Brandy and I were there with him, and we were trying to give him something to drink, and he said no. And then we said, drink this. This is very important. He said no. And he was on drugs, so he was a little bit. What were they? I forget what they gave you, but you were. And I remember just saying, Andy. And I went over to Brandy and I said, I can't believe he's not drinking this. And so we'll just make him some tea or something. And so he got tea, and then he said, pouring lots of sugar in it. And I said, Andy, hold on with the sugar. And he looked at me and Brandy and he said, I can tell both of you are trying to make me do something I don't want to do. Something along those lines. And I thought, what? And I looked over at Brandy, and Brandy can give you the details later, Brandy. And Brandy looked at me and said, what? He thinks we're plotting something against him. But anyhow, you were so stubborn even in that moment. So maybe if there's anything around there that we can find why Andy is so stubborn.
Well, I just want to say one thing about, this is just an example, like one thing you should not do, in my opinion, is to use your chart as an excuse for bad decisions or treating people badly or embodying like negative traits. And I'm not saying that because like, oh, you shouldn't be stubborn or whatever. But one of the things that I think is so cool about just it's just embodied like in the circle, like there's all these axes, right? So every sign has an opposite sign and a sort of opposite energy. And I always think of like, okay, if you just think of your best quality or one of your best qualities right now. So like for me, like I'm very strong-willed, I'm very determined. And mom always said that about me growing up, right? Like that's like a really positive thing. Like I don't give up. Well, flip it, right? What's my worst quality? One of my worst qualities is that I'm stubborn, right? And very hard-headed at times. So, and I think that's often the case where like the negative traits about ourselves are also, they're just kind of flipped manifestations of our best qualities. And so that's not to say like, you should just use that as an excuse to keep being that way. But I think it's helpful from like a human psychology point of view. And it's like, well, we can look for where Andy's stubborn in this chart. And yeah, hell yeah, we can find it, right? But we can also look at this chart and find like ways out of that, right? Like, or more like healthier, or even just like more appropriate for whatever moment you're in now, right? I do think like it can often be really helpful helping us to, I guess, just laugh at ourselves. Like that sounds like a moment where it's like he knows we're trying to control him and he's not having it, right? And I think it can be fun in that way, like, oh my god, like the Leo wanting to be the center of attention again, right? Or like the Cancer like being overly emotional. Like they're stereotypes to some extent, but they can also be ways to kind of laugh at ourselves, but then ultimately to try to sort of flip it. Okay, I'm looking at the time. We should move on, but just a couple other things. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Well, you said that there's a lot of water. What does that mean though? Like that, if there's a lot of water, like are there implications for that? Are there tendencies within that?
Yeah, I mean, there's associations with each element, and I think I kind of say water's more associated with emotion, intuition, empathy.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that like because you have a lot of water, you're going to be an emotional person. But I think like, I mean, even just based on the little anecdote that you shared a few minutes ago, right? Like this idea of like, actually sort of learning to connect to your emotions and learning to express them despite cultural barriers or how you were brought up or whatever, right? Was actually really freeing for you. And that like, yeah, that's there in the chart, right? And like the way that you fight, right? Like again, back to your Mars in Cancer, like you're not like signing up for the front lines, you're not hitting people, right? I mean, maybe there was a time in your life where you were like that, I don't know, right? But like the really like it's not a coincidence, right? That like that was a moment that you just brought up, right? Where it's like, no, you fought for the people you love, like in the way that was going to protect them, right? To the best of your ability. Jupiter. So I have this placement too in my chart, not in the same house, but I have Jupiter in Cancer too. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So you can think about like, well, what does it mean like to expand the idea of home, right? Or to expand emotional depth, right? Like to connect, to learn to trust your intuition, right? In the way that like a mother's inherent intuition, right, is the greatest wisdom, right? It's like the purest form of wisdom. The other thing, I have to bring this up because you've got Pluto, okay, and Uranus. So these are outer planets. They're much slower moving. So your Pluto's in Virgo. I think Kenny and Eduardo and I probably all have the same zodiac sign in terms of our Pluto placement because that's how slow it moves. It's like a generational quality. So it's not, I don't attribute a whole lot of significance to the zodiac sign for those outer planets in terms of like personality. Those outer planets to me are more interesting in thinking about like the collective, right? Like right now, like the Pluto transits, thinking about how, so Pluto's like power, darkness, like the underworld. So right now in our society with the way Pluto is transiting, it's like the way that we understand power as a collective is changing. So that's kind of how I would study the zodiac signs. But you have another conjunction here. So 16 degrees, literally a tight conjunction right here with Uranus and Pluto. And Uranus is quick changing, insight, epiphany, revolution, change, innovation. And you have this right on top of Pluto. So sign of the underworld, sign of death, sign of power, sexuality, all of that. Like this to me, that's like revolution energy, right? And yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Marxist revolutionaries got that conjunction. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, I mean, there's so much more, we could go on forever, but your Saturn up here. So Saturn kind of gets a bad rap because it's restriction, it's limitation. It can sometimes be associated with like long-standing institutions, tradition, time. Also, grandfather time is one of the sort of archetypes associated with Saturn. And then you have, this is an asteroid, which I wouldn't always talk about an asteroid with like, I don't know, in like the first astrology reading with someone, but it's on here. And your Saturn and so it's called Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer. So it often tends to represent kind of our deepest wounds, our like where we've really been hurt, maybe in a past life if you believe in that stuff, maybe in childhood. Yeah, it's like sensitivity, and in a water sign, it's like even that much more kind of sensitive. So this stuck out to me because that's like, I don't know, like that's like hard. That's like, I don't know, you've been through some shit. Like that's intense. Like that is, difficulty. And I think, there's one way to look at a chart and be like, ooh, that's scary. Wounded healer, and then like grandfather time, planet of restriction and reality check. But it's also like, wow, what have you had to overcome in your life? And in Pisces, water sign, Pisces is kind of connected.
Can you say that just the asteroids normally mean something negative?
No, just so this particular asteroid is called Chiron, who is known as the wounded healer. So just in the sense that it can represent deep wounds, and it being right here, only a few degrees away from Saturn, which is the planet of restriction. Just those two energies kind of, like I said, when they're that close together, it's kind of like the energies kind of meld, right? And so when you have difficulty, right? Which like, I mean, everybody should have difficulty in their life, right? But it's just kind of an interesting aspect that I noticed here. But again, the water's flowing through this triangle here, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll say one story and then I'll tell you my thoughts. Really, almost as much about you in this presentation, Jess. That story. There's a lot of things that I think in my past that I think were painful, but it does remind me of something that's come up in when I moved when my dad was transferred from New York to Ohio and he moved from New York to Cincinnati. And I don't even remember this, but my later friends told me that I would get beat up by my neighborhood mates, like because I spoke with a New York accent and I was in the Midwest, and I was just different, and so I know that, and eventually I did. Like I actually clocked a kid, in response to that, and like then they stopped doing it. But there was also a period, and I think it was during that time when I was running around kissing everyone, and I would run away from them because like I know it upset them, but at the same time, that's what I wanted to do. I was gonna and it wasn't girls; it was mostly boys, and I'd kiss them when they weren't looking, and then I'd run away because they would get so mad at me. I think of that as me attempting to try to like change the game, get water flowing, if you will, in my own neighborhood, and then things kind of cemented over. I think a lot in that time in the Midwest. That's the one thing I think about as I see all this stuff. The other thing, Jess, is it's just amazing to hear you explain this stuff. Like, you're an amazing teacher, and it's amazing for me to hear you talk. You're talking about all this stuff, and I hear the same you that I always get to hear. There's not a difference. It's not like you're some expert now who's giving a presentation and a talk, which as a person in science, that's what I would see people do when they gave their presentation. They didn't sound the same as themselves in real life, which I always thought was like, why? Why would we not sound the same as we talk about the stuff we know as we do in our regular life? And it's actually just beautiful to see you do this like in this way, and with such a knowledge and such flexibility, and a kind of holding things open in a space, but and at the same time trying to be precise, but you just sounding like you. So I really want to say I really respect that.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. And running around kissing kids is like, we didn't talk about your Venus, but your Venus is in Gemini, which is very like flirty, social energy. Brandy's a Libra, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes too, like obviously Venus is planet of love, all types of love, not just romantic love, but oftentimes we, think of it in terms of romance. And yeah, I think it can sometimes represent kind of like what we look for in a partner. So I think it's interesting. Gemini is an air sign, and Libra is also an air sign. So it's interesting that your Venus is in an air sign. Yeah, and that Mars is big too. Like clocking people. Like Mars is Mars is ruled by Aries, which Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. And so it can often be kind of connected to like early childhood. The idea of like the first breath, like literally the first breath that you take as a human, but then also like, yeah, those like childhood experiences, which are so formative, even if they're sort of silly and like raw, right? It's like, you're just like pure, adrenaline or emotion or insecurity sometimes, right? And it's like the little glyph here, right? It's like the circle, like that's you, that's your whole self. And then the arrow is like, what do you do with it? Like, let's go, right? And when you're a kid, it's like, let's hit someone, let's kiss someone to piss them off or whatever, right? And then over time, like you've learned to channel it, right? And then it's like, let me help this kid, right, who's about to get kicked out of our school. Let me step in and protect in the way that I can, right? So that's cool. So we go to
Thank you. Let's do Eduardo.
I wanted to just ask one question about this. When you say water flowing everywhere, what does that mean? You said that several times. Just
well, it's a harmonious like positioning, the trine. So it's a good thing. It means that like your sun and your moon and everything you talked about there, like the energy, you can kind of think of it as like the planets are having conversations, right? And sometimes those conversations are like, let's hug and meld, right? Here's your like 1 degree, right? Or like these guys on top of each other, or these guys really on top of each other. Sometimes it's like, let's in an opposition. So that's what like this little sign here, when you're 180 degrees, right? Then it's like, okay, we're having a conversation, but we're in different places. A square is tension, right? So it can be like argument, frustration, difficulty. Sextile is like supremely harmonious, but in a way that's less easy. It kind of requires more action. The trine is like it's very flowing, like even without the water element. You add the water element to it, and it is like, it's just so fluid. So it's a good thing. It can be a good thing, right? It means like your Saturn, planet of limitation and restriction and time and reality, can be easily connected to or in conversation with your sun and your moon, your emotional life. And then over here, your Neptune, right, which is kind of your, I don't know, it could be your art or your spiritual practice or your drug and alcohol use or whatever, right? It can also, like, I've heard astrologers say, and I found this to be kind of true, that like sometimes if somebody has like a lot of trines and like nothing else, which is not true for Andy's chart, like you see there's red, right? Like there's tension. But it can almost be like too easy. Like Trump, it's so funny. I was looking at Donald Trump's, we used him as like one of just like an example birth chart. Let me pull it up actually, because I have it just for a second. this dude, like, there's opposition. There's basically like no tension at all in his chart. Like, you just have like trines, right? And it's like, okay, this is an extreme example, right? But like, this is a dude who's never had to overcome anything. Like, he's had whatever he wants, got all the money, he can just, right? I mean, I like, obviously as a person behind like the public persona. But I just bring it up to say, like, I don't think any placement or any transit or aspect or whatever is like inherently like good or bad. Like, yes, trine, it's a harmonious, easy flowing energy, right? Like between planets. So whatever planets it is, right? Like whoever they represent, like whatever they represent, it means that there's going to be easier flowing conversation there, right? What comes of that, who knows, right? But it's not inherently good or bad, is I guess all I'm really trying to say. And it's funny because like you do have this dominant water energy, right? Like there's a lot of water. Like you have air, you have earth, you have one planet in a fire sign. But even if we just look at the water, like even though there's so much water and it's flowing and everything, like you actually have balance because you've got all three. You've got Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer, which represent different elements like within that one water element, right? Each has their own kind of energy. And to have them kind of flowing like that, like you have an inherent kind of balance within that realm of emotion and intuition and empathy. Like that balance is available to you. Does that make sense? I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It does. And well, sorry.
No, it's your chart.
Yeah, it does. And I think if I would have heard this thing earlier in my life when I was more tapped down and cement over me, I'm not sure what I would have made of it. But I think when you said it shows a possible place, it shows what's available to you. I think I would probably have been still too separated from my emotions to make sense of that. But there would have been another time that would have definitely made me cry to hear. Because that I feel like it speaks to a kind of hope I've had all my life to uncover that.
Well, good. Our work here is done.
Yes. That's good, Eduardo.
Okay, so Eduardo, you said you checked with your dad. How confident are you in this birth time?
I don't know if you know, I was just checking with my mom here just to see if it's a debate between my dad. I do know it's in the evening.
Okay.
It's between 6 p.m. and like 8 p.m. around there. So my dad's very confident. I'm going with my dad. My dad said, I got off of work and you weren't born yet. And so I had to wait until 6-ish.
6-ish?
Yeah. And my mom's like, no, it was around 8. It was around 9. No, I trust my dad because my mom doesn't care about what time you're born. I know her.
He was busy giving birth.
Yes, she was tired. And my dad would have nothing to do. So he was just waiting around, but he said he was there. He was present and he was waiting. And he remembers it was around that time because he was hungry.
I am inclined, just based on what little knowledge I have of you, I'm inclined to kind of side with him. And again, like how much objectivity I want to inhabit is always up for debate. But let's start with your big three, kind of like we did with Andy. So your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. So sun is in Cancer, same as Andy. And your moon is in Libra, and I don't believe the moon changed signs that day, or at least not within this time period. So your moon is in Libra, air sign Libra. And then if we go with your dad, your rising sign is Sagittarius, fire sign. If we go a little bit later, it moves into Capricorn. It could be, so I guess we could talk about the cusp, because I know you had brought that up before. So you were born in 29 degrees of Cancer. So 12 zodiac signs, 365 degrees in a circle. No, 360 degrees. Sorry. 30 degrees per zodiac sign. So 29 degrees is right at the end. So I think the sun probably moved like the next day into Leo. And it's a good reminder, like if you just go on whatever, some basic horoscope, or you look up dates on Google, right? It's going to give you like July 21st or whatever it is until August, right? It's going to give you those dates. Those are stock dates. They're not, if you're on the cusp, like Eduardo is, like you really want to actually go and check, because it's not exactly the same time, or even in some cases the same day every year that it changes, right? Like even something like a leap year can throw it off. So like if Eduardo had been born, say like even just like a few hours later, I mean, let's just see, like when did the sun actually move into Leo? Maybe I see. Okay, here we go. So around 8 a.m. the next day would have put you in Leo. So if you were a little closer, right, and you had just like checked your date, like say you had been born like 2 a.m. the next morning, you might go your whole life like thinking that you were a Leo when really your sun is actually at the very, very, very late degree of Cancer. So it's just a good reminder to actually go and look at a real, and it's very easy. Like I'm using a kind of fancy software here, but like there's plenty of free sites where you can go and look at your actual birth chart, even just to get to just be sure of like your, at least your sun sign. Okay, so I'm going back to 6 p.m. Here we go. So the cusp is really interesting. There's different theories on kind of how to interpret that, but a widely kind of accepted idea is that oftentimes people born on the cusp, like right between two signs, can kind of take on attributes of both. They can kind of feel pulled in multiple directions. And I would like, the reason that the Sagittarius over here, like the fire ascendant sign, kind of made me think, because if I feel like, I don't know, I feel like you have some fire to your personality, Eduardo, at least based on and you do, well, we have to talk about your Mars as well. But the ascendant sign is kind of like what you outwardly express. Like I mentioned, it could be like physically, or it could just be kind of like the interpretation that other people have of you. And I feel like you do, like you have like a fiery kind of like you're stylish. You always got like a scarf or like a hat, got cool hair, and like I feel like, I don't know, if I had to guess if your ascendant was Sagittarius or Capricorn, just based on my limited knowledge, without doing like a proper rectification, like I'd probably go with Sagittarius. But I could also kind of be picking up on, maybe you're picking up some Leo traits, right? Which I know well, being a Leo. You also you're so close to the fire sign in terms of your sun sign. So yeah, back to that idea of the cusp and kind of being pulled in multiple directions. So your actual sun sign is Cancer. So again, the sign of home. And so the first thing I thought of is like, well, you literally are pulled like in literal different directions, right? Like San Francisco, Mexico, you're traveling, right? France and Colombia, and right, like you literally are being pulled in multiple directions, like whether that's internally or geographically, and your sun sign being in Cancer, that kind of makes sense. And the cusp can be also associated, like any cusp, not just between Cancer and Leo, but any like 29th degree like this, or even like 0, if you were 0 degrees into the next one, or 1 degree. It can be kind of like a crisis point. I mean, that's a very stock interpretation, but it can be like, yeah, there's maybe a little crisis. It can also be interpreted as kind of like a fateful sort of placement. If you think about it just in terms of cycles and like the wheel of the zodiac, right? Like you were born 29 degrees of Cancer, so one cycle or like mini season, right, is ending. Another door is sort of about to open. for you, for the world, right? Like we're about to enter Leo season. So could be kind of pertaining to like your self-expression, because this is your sun we're talking about. So I don't know if that resonates at all, but yeah, it's worth noting that like 29 degrees, right? Like it'd be very different than if you were kind of like in the middle of Cancer season. So even within that like one zodiac sign, like just looking at your sun sign already, like we can see there's nuance to it. Looking at Andy's versus Eduardo's.
I have a question around, you said that normally Cancers are home folks. Like, does that mean that we're always looking for stability? Is that it?
It could be, not necessarily. I mean, sometimes it's like Cancer can be associated with like really craving that, like that comfort, yeah, stability, comfort, even just something like superficial, like making your physical environment like a really like cozy, loving place, right? But it could also be broader, like less material understandings of home. Who are you at home with? And Cancer is such an intuitive, like again with the water, right? And your Mercury, planet of communication, right, is also, and the Mercury does tend to run like pretty close with the sun, so this is not like an uncommon placement. But I mean, the distance between these guys, but like you're a very like the way that you apply your intuition to your communications with other people, the way that you exchange ideas, the way that you exchange words with other people, right? Like it's not just that like home is a theme perhaps in your life, whether that's craving stability or craving like a home in terms of like your social network, right? As like an immaterial sort of feeling of home, of being at home with people, or in a place, in a country, or literally like in a room or a house. But I think you also, like we've talked about this, especially on the past couple episodes, of like you have an innate ability, I think, to like make other people feel at home, right? Like to make other people feel like they're safe with you. And I think like that's not just your Cancer sun sign. Yes, like the sort of protective mother energy, right? But also it's communication, like your Mercury here, right? Is how you express ideas and express yourself and talk to other people and exchange with them. So yeah, that, I think that stands out to me too.
I see. Yeah. I've spoken with Andy about our personalities, and I've talked about, and I not in this form, and I'm trying to find out how, or figure out how like it fits here. I definitely feel Andy and I share this empathetic self toward others, but where I feel he is more, he has other strengths I find in other ways, but we have, we like, I think all of us, if you think about anyone who's trying to seek a better world and trying to make the world a better place, you're going to find yourself in this realm, right? And we all have our differences in how we try. I mean, being an educator or working in the community, or trying to do something about like relative topics, not just because we're philosophizing here about politics, but because we want to do actual things, right, in the world. I think gives us that is the reason why we are the way I think we are, because we're trying to care for others. I think there's a sense of us that wants to care for others. Now, as Cancers, I'm listening, and I'm thinking, or I'm trying to figure out how is it relevant to maybe my nurturing aspect, that I always feel like I have to father, brother, or be a mentor of some sort. I've always felt that way. It seems like most of my friends have been polar opposites, either really young or really older than, or older than me. Not so much in my, it isn't until recently, but not so much until that are around my generation. I didn't really, because I was up, but I knew how to be with people older than me, and I knew how to be with people younger than me. Seeing how that, like, my personality, my form of being, my my zodiac sign, I think you would say, fits into it.
Yeah, I mean, Cancer is definitely associated with that idea of like nurturing, not necessarily people younger than you. It could be any age. But that also, I feel like that brings us to Venus. So you and Andy actually have the same Venus sign. Again, Venus is a personal planet, so it tends to run like fairly close to Mercury and the Sun. So not a coincidence, right? Because you guys were born within the same zodiac sign, but you guys both have Venus in Gemini. And Gemini, so Gemini is the twin, like that's the symbol of Gemini is the twin, and you can even see like with the glyph, right? Like it's like two twins, two little lines. And in some sense, like, yeah, it is about like siblings, but it's like brothers and sisters in the way that like Marxists talk about it, right? It doesn't have to be like your actual brother or your actual sister. It's about like being able to see yourself, like see your twin in another person. And Venus being the planet of love, again, romantic love, but also familial love, brotherly love, self-love, right? Like the many different parts of ourselves. I always think of like Whitman, right? Like, I am large, I contain multitudes. Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself, right? So I think that's interesting. Like you clearly have an ability to like see yourself reflected, and to connect, right? Like across age differences or nationalities, cultures, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. And Andy too, like being a teacher, because your Venus is in the same zodiac sign, different house. The other thing, so that
Eduardo, would you mind if I ask a question about this in relationship to you?
You can ask anything. Yeah, sure.
Okay, and you can decide how to edit it. And
sure.
Like that. Because one of the things that came up for me, and I'd like to hear what you think about this, Eduardo, like what I'm going to say, and then Jessica, like particularly that you talked about that the tension or the tension between the Leo and the Cancer,
mm-hmm.
And so there are people I would describe who are as indecisive, kind of adrift almost, and things like that. There's a way sometimes I might have described you, Eduardo, as indecisive, but that would never fit for me. But I would describe you as torn, as if pulled in directions and strongly. It's indecisive and has nothing strong. But what I experience from you, Eduardo, and the challenge sometimes in our conversations when I talk with you about situations I feel you in, I experience it as you being torn between two poles that are pulling you towards one type of thing that could be good. It could be good, and another thing that could be good, but you are left trapped or stuck, being in this kind of tug of war, both internally or externally. And that was something I thought about as you said this, thinking about cusp, Jessica and Eduardo. I don't know if that, but that's sometimes I feel like the challenge in talking to you. I don't mean challenge like, oh, I don't want to talk, but like is that you describe these things that are in conflict, and I don't actually know can't really give advice because both things are there and both things. So I don't know how to resolve the tug of war sometimes, and some of the things we talk about that you have elements in your life and things in your life. Does that make sense, Jessica, what I'm describing?
Yeah, but I want to just clarify. There can be that sense, like I said, like being pulled in multiple directions with the cusp. I totally get what you're saying, but I also want to just bring into this conversation Eduardo's moon. Because let's remember in Andy's chart, the sun and the moon were like right on top of each other, almost like merging, right? Here you actually have a square. So that is tension, like that is tension, right? So you have your kind of self-expression, like who you are, can also be your ego, healthy ego, or like ego as we often sort of negatively interpret that word. And then your moon is your emotional life, right? And your emotion, your feelings, emotions. And Eduardo's moon is in Libra, which Libra is notorious for being indecisive, and also people pleasing. So I think there's this like nurturing sun with the Mercury over here, right? But this sun is actually having this conversation of tension with air sign moon, which is the emotional life, right? Like the need to be liked, the need to people please, but also like uncertainty, kind of not knowing. And Libra, I mean, Libra's also, I'm sort of highlighting the negative aspects of that sign, but Libra is all about balance. It's the scales, right? So it's a beautiful sign. Like people who are like sun sign Libra, especially, is oftentimes they're like diplomats, or they're like conflict resolution counselors, right? Or like they want peace, right? They want, and I often feel like Eduardo kind of inhabits this role, even on What's Left, of like craving, like especially emotionally, like wanting like harmony and wanting balance and a real, like not like a fake superficial peace, but like a depth of emotional stability and peace. And then I want to let Eduardo jump in here, but I also just want to throw out, and again, we'd have to do like a proper rectification to know for sure about this ascendant sign, but if your dad is correct, Sagittarius rising sign, what you kind of express physically, how people like see you in the world. Fire sign Sagittarius represents travel, philosophy, higher education. It's like I feel like you come across like you're so outgoing, you speak all these languages, you can just like go talk to anyone. Like Sagittarius, so confident. Sagittarius is, I can say this because I'm a Leo. Sagittarius, like Leo confidence, but like without the sort of inner like childlike insecurity, right? Like these people are winners. But this is like how people see you, right? Not necessarily how you think of yourself. And I just bring that up because with the travel, and yeah, like I don't know, like there is tension, like there is tension. The cusp can be being pulled in different directions, but I also want to just mention like the zodiac signs, they're not in like a random order. So each sign kind of responds to the previous sign and like gives us what we need, right? Like we all maybe have our favorite seasons right now. I'm like, yeah, it's Leo season. I love it. Like I love summer. The sun's out, right? But like nature, right? Like the winter like is needed after the autumn. The spring is needed after the what comes before spring, winter. But same thing with like it's not that Leo and Cancer are like oppositional, right? Like it's just that Eduardo was born like right in the doorway between those. But I feel like the sun and the moon square tension here, like that reflects what you said, Andy. I don't know how Eduardo feels. I'm gonna get a light, but I'm listening because I'm noticing I'm in the dark right now. But you guys can keep talking.
Yeah. I mean, I'll respond to what Andy's just said. I do feel torn. There's a lot in the people pleasing area for sure. There's a lot there going on. I feel maybe this is a discussion we'll have later on, you and I, Andy, but I do feel I have a responsibility. I have so many responsibilities. Like there's my life to my nephew. There's the life I've given to my friends in Colombia. There's the life I have to offer to my family in Mexico. There's the life I have that like this year I was supposed to go to Africa. I didn't go. Like the life that I told I would be there. I feel bad for like my friend Nicolas, who is obviously wanted me to spend at least August with him in France. And I decided to stay in Colombia. Now I'm being invited to go spend my holidays in Venezuela as gratitude. And I have my plans in Mexico to go to, like I have to go there. But I also have my brother here who obviously needs me and wants me to be here and to support him. And he's so happy I'm here. You know, it's, and my partner who is obviously happy that I'm here as well. and who wants me to travel with him to his family to meet their family. But it's challenging. I feel so torn here, there, here. These aren't just people I just randomly met. These are people I've built relationships with, lived with, stayed with, have helped, supported, whatever, you know. I do feel. One thing that has helped during the pandemic now is that I've shed off friends. Like, not because I wanted to, but because they left me. So it's like a community of SF friends that went woo, over there, like an avalanche. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were leaving each other. Okay, bye. No, I do feel that way. People pleasing for sure. I don't feel like I'm very successful or confident in lots of things that I have done. I think that is a perception. I think it comes off sometimes even creído, which is egocentric, I think it is. And even as we're talking about my chart, I get a lot of anxiety talking about me. So it's something that I have to work with. So I mean, I know you said that's a perception of people, not necessarily what I feel. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like how people view you, or sometimes it's just kind of like how you physically look. Mm-hmm. I wanted to also just mention Mars down here, which we talked a lot about, Andy's Mars. Mars in home sign of Aries, right? So Aries rules over Mars. So this is like a very, Mars loves to be in Aries. This is another fire sign. And this is like, and I know this is true, this is like, Eduardo will slap a bitch, right? Like when he needs to, right? This is like Andy, stop interrupting me. Let me finish, right? So this is like serious strength right there. I love that place.
Finally, an explanation. Finally an explanation.
No, wait, let me explain something.
No, it's beautiful. It's you.
No, let me say something. I always wonder how people can be so daring, you know? Like, I don't know how people have the audacity to do something so daring and to almost embarrass someone else. I know Andy doesn't try to embarrass me, but like some people have done things in public to me, and then that's when I will do something in public to you back. Someone said to me at a Colombian restaurant, someone said, it was like, we were at the terminal, I was leaving my friend, and he said, Mexican food, because I said, well, this avocado is so long, I've never seen an avocado this long. And, you know, and I said, in my country, we have the ones with the black peel. And he said, well, in your country, in Mexico, they have horrible gastronomy. And I said, what? And everyone's watching. I was like, did he say that in front of everyone? I'm thinking, where did he get that audacity to speak to me that way? So in that moment, if you feel so confident to say something like that to me, then in public, I will say something back to you in public. So I said to him, where have you traveled outside of this country? Because I'm in your country and I can tell you what tastes good and what does not taste good. And I can compare. And I said in front of everyone, but all you eat is rice. Now, I don't want to say, and I said, you don't even know what we eat. And I said that, you know, really, I felt bad. He felt red. And then my friend Rosemary underneath was like sort of tapping my foot to stop. But I can't believe people have, you know, like if they have that audacity, I don't know how else to explain it, to do something like that. Like, and Andy didn't have any intentions, but I can't believe he interrupted me. And we're in the middle of what's left with three other people. Like if he interrupted me privately, that'd be different. But I didn't realize, Andy, why would you would just really just interrupt me like that in front of people? So it's like, okay, well, let's do this. If you're going to do this publicly, I'll do this publicly too.
Yep. I mean, that's like the Libra, like, no, this is like, we're supposed to be in harmony here, like having conversation. Andy crosses, and then here comes God of War. Like, yeah, you're gonna step back, right? I also want to point out that your Mars is trining your sun, so that really easy flowing, harmonious energy that we talked about with Andy's chart. You have that same angle with Mars and your sun, which to me kind of says like, okay, yeah, you might be pulled in all of these directions, right? And you might have this internal sort of tension between your emotional life and your sort of like selfhood. All of that may be true, but at the end of the day, you're going to fight for the ones that you love. You're going to fight for your home, however you interpret that to be, your country, your family, your chosen family. So that's a really beautiful placement. And then also another like incredibly harmonious aspect here, your sun and your Jupiter. So Jupiter is again the planet of expansion, fortune, luck, blessings. Now this is not a trine. This is called a sextile. So it's 360 divided by 6, whatever that number of different.
Andy can tell us.
60, right? Yeah, 6 times 6 is 36. So 60.
Oh yes.
Which supremely harmonious. And sextile, it's flowing like harmonious energy in the same way that a trine is. But a sextile, I almost like it more because the way that I've heard it described is it's like a trine, but it requires work. It requires like action. And for that reason, like it's that much more fulfilling, right? Like when you put in the work, like whatever that reward is so much more meaningful than if it's just sort of like if it just happens or it's given to you. So thinking about that idea in the context of your sun in Cancer, home, belonging, nurturing, caring for those you love, and then Jupiter. And Jupiter basically just like anytime Jupiter's having a conversation, especially a conversation of harmony with any other planet, it has like a magnifying effect. I mean, literally, right? Like Jupiter's fucking huge, huge planet, right? So it's like whatever the vibe is, it blows it up. Usually in a positive way, right? Because it's blessings, it's expansion. So your Jupiter's in Gemini, air sign Gemini, which makes sense to me because Gemini is all about like ideas and exchange and communication and connection. And it's like, you learn to know all these languages and that, again, the idea that we talked about with your Venus of like seeing yourself in another person and enabling that to drive like your connection to them and how you communicate with them. So there's also like, I know we kind of started off talking about a lot of like tension in your chart, but like, wow, like there's some really harmonious angles too. So just wanted to bring that up.
All right. And
can I ask a question again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one, and you've seen this, Jessica, this one aspect of my relationship with Eduardo that's kind of come up is like my approach to editing and his approach to editing. You know, like Eduardo has this part. I might have said he's being private, but it's also very deliberate and very kind of careful and very attention to detail. Like, do you see in this a way of explaining why Eduardo was like, no, we got to cut that, like, and I'm like, like keep it all, put it on there, it'd be fine. We'll work it out after people troll us or whatever. And do you see something here that explains Eduardo's approach, or at least speaks to that approach?
I mean, I'm always hesitant to be like, I mean, you can find it if you want it. But I guess, I mean, the moon is what I would come back to with that of like Libra being kind of an indecisive, like in its lower vibration. Libra's higher vibration, it's balance, it's bringing harmony, right? It's like meeting halfway in a really beautiful, productive way. Lower vibration is like, I can't make a decision. Like, do I want to share this? Do I not want to share this? Should we cut this bit or should we not? I'm not sure about that title. But it's the moon, right? So it's like your emotions. It's like I mean, the moon can be like deeply private, right? Like that's your internal life. That's not like your how people perceive you, like your self-expression or whatever, right? Um, it's like the depth of feeling, right? And so there's so much more risk there in terms of feeling like if something doesn't go well or somebody says something, like there's so much more risk of being hurt than with really any other planet, right? So that's kind of where I would go with that. Um,
Andy's chart seemed to have more blue and more connected, or more of a shape. And mine seems to be this opening. This is a very thin line here that's not connected.
Yeah.
Eduardo wants more blue.
No, what is this?
In some sense, you're right. So what they're doing is they are making the software makes and I'm sure I could probably change the colors or turn it off, but it makes like quote unquote like more traditionally harmonious aspects blue and then more tension in red. That said, like you're kind of probably getting a little bit of a skewed vision of it because for one, like not every line you can see like the thicker lines on here are the more precise aspects. So that's kind of what some of the ones that I've been highlighting have been the thicker lines. These thinner ones, they're like not quite like at the precise degree, but they might be kind of close enough that we'll call it a square. We also like there's a difference between, talking about like major planets, like your sun and your moon or your Mars or whatever it may be, and even the outer planets too. But on here, you have to remember too, and maybe for this, I, in retrospect, should have taken like the asteroids off of here. I have my settings set in such a way that like I have the planets I want. I mean, I have all of the major planets, and then I have like a couple asteroids that I personally like to pay attention to. We didn't talk about the nodes. These are nodes of the moon. So some of these lines are connecting to things like that we haven't covered, like the nodes, like the midheaven. I think a lot of Andy's lines, like he had some squares with his midheaven, which we didn't really talk about. So it's a little bit of a skewed vision, but yeah, I mean, Andy does have, like, he has this big ass, like very dominant water trine, which really is like the big thing in his chart if you're looking at what we call aspects. So again, like the angles. But I mean the red and the blue, it's a little like, black and white like chess. And again, like I just want to reiterate, like these red squares, like that doesn't mean bad, right? And in some ways, like I've heard a lot of astrologers say, like, yeah, if you look at some of the most successful or like well-regarded people throughout history, many of them have like a lot of squares and a lot of like tension, quote unquote, in their chart. And it's like, yeah, you might have to overcome like some of these, like thematic struggles that are happening. And I'm sure there's more for all of us than what we can cover in, the space of a couple hours. But you're not totally wrong. Yeah, I mean, Andy's got a big water trine in the middle of his chart.
Got a lot of water, Andy. That means he's got a lot of fluidity there.
I don't even know what to say about that. But it is very interesting. It's really pleasing to look at.
Yeah, it's fun. And we obviously we won't talk about Kenny because he's not here to defend himself.
Yeah, I
but
know.
I really loved looking at Kenny's chart, and his moon was in Cancer, which was so cool because it was just like across the board, all three of you have these like really major Cancer placements. And the moon rules Cancer. Cancer rules the moon. So that was kind of a cool placement. And then just to look at all three of yours together, like all three of you, like obviously, like just anybody who's watched this show knows that like all three of you have this depth of emotion and intuition and care for people in the world. And your leaders and protectors, and you can see that like in your charts. It's cool.
I think we'll ask Kenny if he wants to do one. Just we'll do him solo, and we'll all maybe because there's more to obviously get in terms of astrology. I have more questions I would want to ask. They're almost astronomical questions, like about astronomy, and I don't know.
I feel like you with your scientific knowledge could probably help me, because I actually really struggle with. I always did, like in school. Like I was really good at like pre-calc and even the trigonometry, like the angles kind of make sense to me, but the physics and like just imagining things that I can't see with my naked eye. I mean, astrology has helped me a lot to improve that, but it's not something that comes easily to me, is like the actual like physics of it.
The only thing I would say is I think cosmology and astronomy are in crisis right now. I mean, in Western science, so its ability to. I think there's some terms that could be used that are still in play, but I think there's a lot that is being thrown up in the air that actually is right now being suppressed to kind of hold on to a certain things like Big Bang Theory, dark matter, dark energy, these terms that are being held on to. And people who are actually challenging some of those are being held down right now. And so I don't actually know how much cosmology has to offer, except I can speak to some things that both sides, the people who I think are actually trying to get at a deeper understanding, will say that, well, there are some things that are in common: gravity, electromagnetism, things like that, that are still that everyone would still speak of as in play. But I think that our normal conception of the universe, and that gravity itself is the thing that really binds everything and makes sense of everything. I think there's people who question that deeply, and I actually think the people who are questioning that are onto something more about what's really how within the terms of Western science we would describe the universe. So I think Big Bang has to go. That's not the discussion we're having today, but that's the implications of it.
Yeah, I think you did an episode before it on Big Bang, but I feel like we should do a revamp with
yeah
web stuff too.
But it was I don't know, man. I think you are right to say that somebody's eyes can be, to say it's a little bit transformative to see. It's not just to see your chart, but to see you use the chart. I think, and the both the precision, but the flexibility with which you approach it. I mean, you must have done. I know you only spoke of you haven't been doing this for that long, but maybe you just you're attuned to it. I don't know. Maybe your chart tells you should be reading charts.
Probably.
Because it seems
I enjoy it. I think it's so much fun, and I mean it's challenging, and it's always like it always feels very risky. Like obviously there's like you could be totally wrong, like, and that's part of the risk, but there's also I think a risk in terms of like how what you say and how you interpret things could affect someone. So yeah, it's hard and it's risky, but I feel like it's so rewarding, and I always enjoy it, and I'm always my boyfriend, he has finally made me make a website for birth readings, but like I give it away. I'm like, oh, you want me to read your birthday? Sure. But
so people, if they wanted to get a reading, they could go to that website. Like, again, it's kind of like Eduardo's episode. This can be an advertisement for you giving chart readings.
Yeah, that's not my main intention with this episode.
Yeah,
but
no, I understand.
I actually do. Yeah, it's very bare bones, but it's doubleleoastrology.com.
All right. Well, people have access to that. I also think, don't you have to it's sort of like who you get tattooed by. I remember somebody who got a lot of tattoos, and they had to really get to know the different tattoos. It wasn't about how good a tattoo artist. You had to kind of like that. You had to feel like their vibe in order to be tattooed by them.
I always encourage people, like, you should get readings from multiple different astrologers to kind of figure out like who you vibe with and like what you like different approaches are, like not just having like one one thing that you look at, or like one, if you're looking at horoscopes, like one astrologer's horoscopes, like, yeah, you might have your favorites, but like try different things. But yeah, like I have like my astrologer who like I love to do readings every so often with, and yeah, you just figure out like if you vibe with the person and it brings something valuable to your life, then great.
Well, if a bunch of people contacted you and wanted to get, I think that would be a great thing. But I know this is not why. I'm just saying, y'all should get your chart read by Jessica. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Well, that was cool, I'll have to say. And I kind of would like to have Kenny do his own if he wants to do one. And then we can just kind of like, I'm just curious what would come up. And then we would just kind of go more deeply into the questions about astrology. Like, I could definitely I would love to talk about this some more.
Yeah. Well, and I know I think he said he had an astrology birth chart reading before. So it'd be cool to hear, like, since for what you guys, it was about the first time, but it'd be cool to hear him.
Yeah, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
How do people do this before the software?
With way more work. Yeah, we've gotten really lazy. It's like people doing math without a calculator. But I mean, it's just in terms of like class analysis. I'll just say really briefly, like it's interesting to look at the history because back in the day, right, like not everybody had access to their birth chart. Like this was something that, was done for kings, and it was often done like through like religious leaders in the community, right? Because they were sort of trusted to interpret the divine, and it was something, that only basically the ruling class, right, like could have done, is like have all of this laid out for them and the calculations. And I mean, even something like a birth certificate, right? Like if you're just born in a slum somewhere, you might not even have that at a lot of points in history. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. And I love, like, we're supposed to be like beginning to enter like the age of Aquarius or whatever, right? And part of that is sort of like democratization of knowledge. Yeah, that's one aspect of it. Yeah. And then I love it. Like, yeah, like everybody should get to, even if you don't have your birth chart, like, or your birth time, you can still get a reading. Like there's rectification methods and stuff. So everybody should get to do it if they want to.
Do you have any good links or something that you would like for us to, if we wanted to learn more about, can you share with that? Or books or something that you could share with us?
Oh God, I have shelves of books.
Well, a few that you think.
I'll just say, like, if you go to that website, it's wwoastrology.com. It has my email on there, and if you have like a specific question, or you want to know more about astrology and the body or whatever, then I could give recommendations there. Like, so just reach out to me if you have questions. But I don't have like a astrology Bible or anything that I want to recommend across the board.
And Eduardo, how did you feel about the reading for you?
I liked it. I think for me, it's I have more questions about like the specifics of planets and everything. I know Jess did a very great job summarizing. I'd like to remember it a little bit more, so I could see. I also had questions about. There's a lot of talk about
conjunction,
compatibility.
Oh, compatibility. Yeah.
How did you say
compatibility?
Combat. It sounds like combat.
Compatibility.
Compatibility. Or that. So when people talk about relationships, they talk about how connect, or that word that you said, connected they are to compatibility. Why am I having a hard time? I'll say complement. They complement each other. No, is that something that, because I hear people say, oh, Cancer doesn't go with this one, or Libra doesn't go with that one. Is that true, or is that, we didn't get into it, but just if you can just say quickly if that's something that's more pop astrology.
I think it's like with the other stuff. Like there's very redundant or very reductive, and probably redundant too, approaches, where it's like, oh, Leo can't be with Scorpio, that'll never work. No, of course not. You can be with whatever sign. But I think it is interesting. Like I've definitely looked at charts in terms of that question of, especially, like romantic partnerships and stuff, but really anything, any type of partnership, there's techniques in terms of looking at your charts, like putting them on. And I really like this software that I got is like still kind of new to me. It was kind of like something I wanted for a long time and finally purchased. And it's really cool because you can have multiple charts. Like I could put your chart like on top of Andy's and kind of look at like where the planets are in relation to each other. Another just like basic thing that might be helpful for people if they're wondering about compatibility is the elements. So fire, water, earth, and air. So it's not that any of those are just not compatible, like won't work. But if you just think about it on a literal level, right? Like too much water will put out a fire, right? You need air to get a fire started, but too much air on a fire, you're going to have raging wildfire on your hands, right? So I think the elements can be a helpful starting place in terms of just thinking about the relationship of like certain signs to other signs or planets. But of course, you can be with whoever you want. If you want to make it work, you have all the energies available.
Right. I don't have anything else to add. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Annie, Jessica, how was this? Like, what did you think? How was this for you in terms of, this is a lot of work.
It's fun. I like doing it. I'm glad you guys didn't hate it.
Heck no, that was cool. Yeah. It's again opened up. It's just, I feel like another windows have been opened up. Like I don't look into that, and it's just, that's definitely, Well,
and I appreciate you guys being willing to, like, have the birth chart readings be public. Because I feel like we could have had a conversation about like astrology and spirituality and stuff, but I just feel like without actually looking at the chart or something, maybe it doesn't have to be a natal reading, but in this case, that's what it was because that's mostly what I do. It just, I don't know, it's a different way in.
You were totally right about needing to center it around that. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jess, for sharing with us. I really wanted to know your birth chart. I know we didn't have time, but I would have really liked for us to look into your birth chart as well. Maybe we'll do Kenny's and Jessica's at the same time.
Yeah.
In the same episode.
We're both rising Leos, me and Kenny. So
that would be a good compare and contrast kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm calling my little astrology business. I don't know if I can call it a business yet. It's called Double Leo Astrology because I'm a double Leo because I have a Leo sun and my ascendant is in Leo. So everybody knows I'm a Leo. Like people always guess that I'm a Leo. Probably because of my hair, but
because it looks like a lion's hair?
Yeah. That's like physical, like ascendant. It's like, oh, red hair, like mane.
I see. Yeah, that's true.
And Kenny kind of looks like, I feel like he looks like King of the Forest. Like, kind of gives out that, like, visual vibe, like externally.
Yeah.
I don't know how he feels inside, but.
No, I could see that.
Fatty lion,
Uh-huh. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / challenging the mainstream left to post information about our topics and our guests in the episode notes. Where we found this episode or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find that on our episode notes. And you can find episodes to this podcast as channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, the Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. I remind you can always find anything in the episode notes. Andy, thank you for doing that. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Jessica and Andy Lipson. You can find our social media handles at Don Eduardo Barca, that's Instagram, or at ZepDKE, Kenny's Instagram, and you can find Jessica's Twitter handle at JHomie89. Thank you. And Jessica, we wish you a very happy birthday.
Yes.
Yesterday was her birthday. Thank you very much for being a part of What's Left team. We very much enjoy you having you here and being that different voice.
And happy full moon, everybody. It'll be over by the time it goes up, but it's an Aquarius full moon tonight.
I didn't know that. But yes, thank you for sharing with us about that. What does that mean, Jessica, quickly? What does that mean, full moon? Do changes happen, or what happens normally?
Lots of emotions. Lots of emotions. Aquarius is like beat of your own drum.
All right.
Well, a big full moon, like very important astrologically. But yeah.
Anytime there's something like that, where there's a full moon or something that you need to tell us about that, please mention it from now on. I'd like to know. Thank you all very much from What's Left, and we'll see you all next time. Ciao.